Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Greiner, your host for today's Swine podcast. And with me today, I have Dr. Victor Ochoa, who is the director of Swineworks. How are you today, Victor?
Very good, Lara. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So I'm glad to have you on today. I think the topic's going to be really great for our audience today. Before we jump into it, though, I know there might be a few people who aren't familiar with you. And so would you mind giving just a little bit more background about yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm a veterinarian. I actually went to school to Mexico City, and I came in the United States back in 2007 to work for Smithfield, actually, in one of these TM programs. And then after a few years, I moved on to PIC, and then I pretty much started this company called Swineworks with me and my family. So we've been we've been kind of successful for the last couple of years. So we're excited to share some experiences and knowledge about this.
hmm Yeah, I think that's great. Some people may not be familiar with Swineworks, and I think that's a really good place to start. So, my understanding of Swineworks is that you help with immigration processes, particularly for individuals that we might be looking for from a visa perspective to help on farm. Is that a fair summary of what you do?
Yeah. We are a staffing company. We specialize not only on the visa part, but we do a lot of what happens behind the scene. Meaning, we do a lot with finding personnel, interviewing them, uh, preparing for their visas interview, doing that process that is required for the visa, but at the same time, it's a process that we help a lot human resources and all departments in the company. So
Mhm.
and then after that, we help a lot with, for example, trainings and follow up with candidates. So it's not just the visas. It's a full service, I guess. That's what we do. Yeah.
Sure. And I think it's important too, and I didn't know this about you till I was reading your biography, is that you are certified in immigration law.
Correct.
So I thought that was actually really interesting.
Yeah. So I get a certification degree from Cornell University on immigration. I have an MBA as well from Colorado State University. So it's more about the business side and than just production.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, that's really fascinating for me. So let's talk about that because I've done a handful of podcasts lately where we're talking about labor and what's happening in the United States. And so, what are you seeing from your side of the fence in terms of labor?
Yeah, I think it's first of all there is a big misunderstanding of what's going on the job market, on the labor market. Everybody right now is blaming COVID, right? And once COVID is gone, we're going back to normal, whatever normal is, depending on the industry. Uh, but if you pay attention, it's been almost 2 years since COVID, and we struggle to find people more than ever. So I think it's a big paradigm that I would like to change with the producers because the issue that we have right now, lacking employees and workforce, is not because of COVID. There is some other uh, problems that were brewing probably 10 years ago, where there is this switch on the generation. Pretty much, we are losing all the baby boomers, so that represents, people don't realize, but that represents about 25% of the workforce. And when you remove that and you add the previous administration where they were very strict on immigration, and pretty much they slow down the influx of immigrants and a workforce, uh, they basically create a gap of almost between 8 and 10 million people in all the industries. So you're probably very familiar that in the swine industry we've been struggling with labor for forever. I mean, I came to the U.S. for that reason. Work for Smithfield because they were struggling to find people, and that was 10 years ago. The big difference right now is, I believe, this is just not on the pig industries, in all the industries right now. So uh, something that I want to change the mind of the producer is, we need to prepare and we need to adapt because this is a new normal now. There is no way that we can find 10 million people right away to fill all the needs in the country. So it's not because of COVID. It's not something that is just gonna go away. So we need to start preparing for how we're gonna find employees, retain the employees that we currently have, and keep running our operation.
Hmm. Absolutely. So I'm going to kind of jump in there for a minute. When you were talking about a little bit on the immigration side, um, your business itself, are you working only with Mexico, South America, or are you doing immigration from all countries into the agriculture industry?
Yeah, currently probably 90% of the business is for TN. We have a little bit of H2As. With let me go back with the TN. They need to come from Mexico, just for people who's not familiar with this program, uh, Mexico or Canada. So 95% of our business is based on the TN visa, and we bring them from Mexico. We have a little bit of H2A clients, and they can come from other countries. And just so you know, we are implementing a J1 visa program, H1, and that's going to allow us to increase our candidate pool from other countries because one of the restrictions of the TN is the nationality, and that's restricting our candidate pool. So having more of a larger pool is going to help us to find better candidates and fulfill our needs.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, are you finding a lot of people currently that want to come to the United States to work in agriculture? I'm trying to understand, I guess, where, besides the fact that we had some issues with our previous administration and so forth, but where's kind of the chokehold today, right? Where's the narrowing? Is it that we don't have the applicants wanting to come, or is it more just the process of getting them through?
Yeah. So the good thing with the TN visa is that there is not a cap on the number of people we can bring compared to the H2Bs or H1Bs. So it's not that we cannot find them. The problem that is happening right now is obviously in Mexico. Well, in one hand, there are a lot of opportunities from the US now looking into Mexico to bring those employees. So employees or candidates start realizing and start asking for more than they used to. So better salaries, better quality of life. So it's getting harder not only for that reason, but because it's getting more competitive. So we just need basically one producer that raise the wage and extremely high compared to other producers for all the candidates to see it. So it's getting harder for us because, for example, we have over 100 clients, and the salaries they range from $12 an hour to $19 an hour. So what is getting harder for us is, and we receive a client that they are just offering $12, $13 an hour. But let's say they live in a different area. They live in the South. They live in maybe Missouri, North Carolina, compared to the other producers that are offering $20 an hour that they live in a more expensive areas. The candidates they don't know that part. The people in Mexico don't realize that the cost of living is different depending on the state and the area. So it's getting harder for us to find candidates, not to find the candidates, but to have them accept the offer from even $13, $14 an hour. So that's a bigger challenge right now that we have, and we are looking for other, uh, I guess, advertising platforms besides social media.
Hmm. Yeah, that's actually interesting. I didn't realize that there was that gap in knowledge in terms of cost of living in different locations. And it makes sense, right? If they talk to their friend and their friend's going to go and make $19, that's quite different, right?
Yeah, and there's a huge difference on not only on the salary part, but on the benefit side, housing, insurance, 401k. So it's very hard to compare apple with apples with that many offers. So what candidates normally do, they just focus on the dollar amount, and that's it. So I'm not saying it's the right or wrong thing to do, but I guess my advice for producers is start looking into their offers and say, okay, what is important to them? What really is important for this new generation, for these candidates, that they're going to be living in Mexico, sending money back to their countries, and maybe health insurance, 401k is not that important for them, and how can we remain competitive on their offer by removing those benefits?
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. What are the most attractive pieces today to this generation when you're talking to them about offers?
Yeah, so this new generation, they really value work life balance, right? So that's something that normally doesn't happen on a pig farm. uh, we cannot work remotely in a farming house. We have to be there, Christmas, New Year's, all of that. So, uh, with that said, I think we need to be creative in that way. How to create an offer for them that is more appealing. So, some of my recommendations that we've seen that's been working out is maybe increasing vacation day or time off. And that seems like is really helping. And the other part, like I mentioned before, they are sending money back to Mexico or their countries. So 401k for me is not for me. For me, it's important, but for a lot of time for the candidates, is not that important. Uh, Insurance is very important, but they don't see the value. They are normally young people who think they are never gonna get hurt. So I will make, for example, that benefit optional for them if they want to take it or not. So I'll say if you focus on get an offer more higher, the dollar wage, dollar amount higher, maybe offering. There's a lot of producers they still don't offer overtime, so that's really attractive for these candidates. And the time off, we all know in the swine industry we have a lot of downtime. If you want to go to another country, a fair or something like that, so we need to keep in mind their families are in Mexico. So if you only provide them with 7 days per year, and they have to spend 4 nights down before coming here, you are actually giving them only 3 days per year. So it's just a little tweak that we can make on their offers that will be drastically change on the perspective.
Hmm. My other question is what about transportation? So I used to do a program called Experience International, and I'd have individuals from various countries, and transportation was always one of the big questions and conversations we had, not just whether or not they had a license, but financially being able to afford a vehicle can be a great strain on people. And so, what are you seeing there in terms of that need? Is it not a need anymore?
No, absolutely, absolutely, there is a need. For us in Swineworks, we make sure all the people that we send, one, are aware of the situation, and second, they have a driver license. Normally, a driver license is good for, I believe, the minimum is 60 days in the U.S. With the international driver license that they have or the Mexican driver license that they have. So we make sure they have it. But you're right. I mean, there is a completely or entirely different situation that we have in Mexico. We have a lot of public transportation, buses, vans that you don't even have to know how to drive in Mexico. There is always public transportation around, and there is a different scenario in the U.S., especially on the pig farm where you are in a remote location. So that's definitely a challenge. How to explain them and make them understand that you have to save money for buying a car. uh, you have to probably bring your own vehicle even though it's just good for 1 year. So it's a big challenge on transportation. We go around by normally producers they offer one vehicle per house and they can share and ride along, or ask some of the current employees that have a car or a vehicle to give them a ride to buy groceries and things like that. So
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's what's important too, is what I've noticed at least is having that sense of community, right? So they're in another country, they may not be here for very long, language may not be fully familiar with, and so how do we create that community? And you mentioned it, right? Housing sometimes is that opportunity where we can put them all in a similar environment, a couple of apartments close by. They can share a car, they can have their cultural events, and have that community. And it's again, is that something that's important to this generation, or is this something that's just from the previous generations?
no, absolutely. I mean, they don't get attached to material things that much, like in the past. That always my dream was to have a brand new vehicle, brand new truck, and that's still true, but in a lesser degree. What we've seen a lot is that, for example, the first person that arrives to this location, they buy a car. and they want to leave, and they actually sell the vehicle to somebody with another TN visa, and the same vehicle is getting sold 3 or 4 times because it's more affordable that way. But but yeah, that's definitely important, and it's gonna vary depending on the location as well. There's some farms that are nearby a big city where they can farm a vehicle. There are other that are remote areas, so uh, it's going to be more difficult to go to groceries or go to Walmart or doing something individually. So I think that's very important. And you mentioned something that is very important specifically to this TM visa worker is a sense of community. So we're seeing more success when we bring a group of them and they live together, two, three, four of them live together versus when we only bring one person and he live by himself in one house and he may have a vehicle from the company but they tend to stay longer if they come with a group than by
Hmm.
themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well, let's kind of walk through if an employer is interested in bringing in a group of individuals from Mexico. Let's start there. Let's start with the TN visa. What does that process look like?
Yeah, we in Swineworks we really like the TM visa because it's very flexible compared to other type of visas like normally on the swine industry they use a lot of H2As or J visas. I'm gonna start with some of the issues with these visas, and for example, with the J1 is that they have to go back to their country for 2 years before they are allowed to come back again. So that doesn't happen with the TN. With the H2A, you have the Department of Labor overseeing this program, meaning you have all these audits, you have to provide housing, you have to provide transportation, their entire stay, and they are not that flexible to change duties. Let's say you promote somebody, uh, maybe their activities are not written down on their contract, so they might not be able to do it, and they still have to go back to their country, Mexico or whatever other country is. And those issues you don't have them with the TN. So with the TN, you are not required to provide housing, transportation, even though I think it's a good benefit because I mean they don't know anybody when first just started, uh, and and the other part is very quick compared to other programs. So, for example, right now it's taking us about 6 to 8 weeks to process their visas. It can take longer sometimes depending on the embassy, but compared to H1s, J1s, H2As, all of those visas, it's faster and more flexible. So every time we talk with a new client and that are interested in other process on our visas, we trying to lead them into pick one of the TN visa program because you don't have to qualify for the perm to any of those certification that you need from the Department of Labor. So that's why I really like it.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's important too to impress upon people who are maybe considering this route is it's important to work with a company such as yourself that's familiar with this process because just understanding the visas alone is extremely complicated, let alone the process of working with the embassies and making sure all the paperwork is in line. And so, for our audience who is listening, if you are considering this, I highly encourage you to work with somebody who has that knowledge base for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we have the experience so far. We have placed around almost 700 people in the last couple of years. Uh, but the other part, there are a lot of recruiters popping up in Mexico that and the way it works over there is not always the legal way. So you need to be very careful when you start dealing with other companies, especially if they are overseas or in another country. They have to comply with the U.S. immigration laws as well, and all the U.S. laws, not only the immigration. So a lot of the time, those recruiters, they don't even know there's any regulations or laws that we need to comply with. So it's very important you work somebody with experience and they comply with any law or regulation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we touched a little bit on this new generation and some of the desires that they would have in that offer package, but how do we retain them, right? Because a TN visa um, worker can come back, right? They can come back and work again in the United States, and obviously, if we've had them train in our business, we would like for them to come back and consider our business again. So, how do we help them with that? What's the value there?
I think for this generation, the key word is they want to feel what they're doing is meaningful. Uh, so everything that we do to get to that point, I think is very important. So create a sense of community, showing them why we do things. It's not just processing pigs, it's not just power washing. Showing them and train them, but teaching them what is the value there, and why we're doing things. And we are feeding America, we are treating the animals the right way. All of those aspects, I think we tend to forget on a day-to-day basis. uh, that part on the job side, and then on the community side, uh, you know the majority of them, like say, they have to come from Mexico under the TN visa. So we have to treat them a little bit different according to their well, our culture, because I'm Mexican as well. But we tend to to be closer with families and friends and relatives, and that's something that doesn't happen in all the farms. So we've seen a lot of clients that they even actually offer the lowest amount of money on the wages, and they have zero turnover. And we ask them why, and and it's very interesting for me because I can see how, the retention rate from a higher wage versus a lower rate. And yeah, you can see where money normally is not the most important part. And when you talk to the employees, they tell you, I mean, they celebrate birthdays, they have barbecues, they have parties. I mean, they have a very, very good feeling of being in a family, even though, I mean, they are in another country, another place. So I think uh, for me, that's a key with this new generation. How you treat them, how you communicate with them. At the same time, we are dealing with millennials, so normally, or compared to other generations, you cannot be as direct as you would like to. uh, they are gonna have a lot of feeling hurts if we treat them the way we treat baby boomers or previous generations. So we have to keep that in mind every time we provide feedback, and that's even more important for the Mexican culture. We are even more sensitive to negative feedback. So things like that on the personal side, I think is more important than just the offer and just the money for this new generation.
Absolutely. That was one of my favorite days at the farm, is when we had potluck and everyone
Uh,
would bring something in, and it was always fun, right? We had a lot of fun and we laughed, and those were really enjoyable times. So I can see where community becomes important, especially when you're in a country that you're not familiar with and you're not familiar with, much around it. That's what you have, right? Is that community within the farm.
I think you have,
So,
at the end of the day, you have to create an environment where, I mean, they are far away from their house, so you have to create an environment where they want to be at the farm, because that
mhm.
I don't want to be at home by myself, missing my family, missing tacos or whatever. I prefer to be at the farm where I enjoy the people who I work with. I like what I do, so we need to make sure we are creating an environment that is friendly for them and according to their needs.
Absolutely. Well, I think you summed it up right there. In that conversation, right? So we've talked a lot about the process of the visas, and I think it's been great just describing the difference in the visas to help our producers think about what one might be best for them. But really, that whole point around creating that community and thinking about their needs and realizing, they are millennials and they do have different needs, and we have to continue to evolve as an industry to work with that next generation. And so absolutely. I think that was a wonderful summary. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I will add to the producers that the 80s and 90s are not coming back. We are not gonna find that type of employees. So we need to adapt. At the end of the day, we need to change the way we do things, because we do that, or we're gonna run a farm with just one person, and that's not fun. So we need to change the way we used to do things, especially with people, reviewing job offers, reviewing uh, the presence that we have in social media, in other platforms where we're gonna find these candidates or these people, uh, compared to the previous generation. Like they don't use Facebook or Instagram, anything like that. So we need to adapt and change at the end of the day, so we can survive this industry.
So you're saying you're going to get out there and put a few TikToks out to get people to
Absolutely, that's the next step.
come work here.
We need to get creative.
I'd love it. Well, as Victor, as we wrap up our time, we always like to ask our guest speaker a couple of questions, that are common across the group. And the first question we'd like to ask is, do you have a swine resource that you'd recommend to the listeners?
Yeah, I don't have a swine resource, but I read a book about pigs that I think is very interesting. You'll find it very interesting, and it talks about the history of the pigs. Not just, I mean, it talks about evolution and biology of the pigs a little bit, but it talks about more on the cultural side of how we see pigs from the
Mhm.
beginning of the years. So I find it very interesting. I highly recommend to anybody who wants to learn more about the animal that we take care every day, and sometimes we don't know why we do things the way we do it. I think it
Mhm.
will open your eyes and help you understand a lot of things about pigs that we do now.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'd like
I
to read
forgot to
that one.
mention the name. The name is Lesser Beast
Lesser
and
Beast.
Lesser Beasts. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah,
I've
yeah.
never
So I
heard of
highly
that one.
recommend. You're gonna love it. It's
Okay.
a quick reading, but you're gonna really like it.
Okay. I'll take your word for that one. How about something that's not related to pigs? Is there a book you'd recommend to the group?
Yeah, there is a couple of books. If you like to talk about philosophy, things like that. I'm a big fan of Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged, one of my favorite ones. But if you want to talk more about business, I think one of the most useful books for me was one called Defining Moments from Joseph Badaracco. And it talks about when you have to make a decision. And that was a key point for me. That a lot of time we create a list, pros and cons. If I do this, happen that. And that's not always the right thing to do. Sometimes you can do both and you just matter have or start thinking outside the box, and that's something that really helped me during my career, and I highly recommend to read that book as well.
That sounds good. Well, the last question we like to ask really is kind of a personal question. If you can think of someone in your life that you have defined as successful, and success can look lots of different ways to many different people, what do you think is the trait about them that you think has allowed them to be successful?
Yeah, first of all, I think I will define success as not always about money. Is doing what you really like to do at the end of the day. If you like to, I don't know, build a car, that's what you dream for. I mean, that's success for me. So and in that tone, for example, I'm a big fan of Elon Musk for that reason. Uh, he has all the money in the world, but his passion is inventing stuff. He actually get rid of all his houses now, and he's just living with friends. Obviously, probably he's having a good life still, but the key for me is I really admire how he just loved to do what he likes to do, and uh, creating stuff, inventing new things, and for me, at the end of the day, that's what success means. So I will say that he's my one of my heroes for sure.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's really true, right? Find your passion and do it well, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, again, Victor, we want to thank you for our time, and unfortunately, it is up. And I do enjoy our visit, so I want to thank you again. For our audience, if you missed the beginning of this is Dr. Victor Ochoa, who is our director of Swineworks, which is involved in immigration and helping us with our visas. Thank you again so much, Victor, for your time today.
Thank you, Laura, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Imagine if, with a few key concepts, you could have the potential to create a massive positive impact by bringing from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars for swine producers. Join us on this small group and go to the next level of swine nutrition on this 7-week long elite online training in applied swine nutrition and feeding by myself and my world-class invited speakers. Additionally, you enjoy an exclusive community to exchange ideas. Go now to www.eliteswinenutritionist.com.